Archives of Prasar Bharati presents the timeless treasure of Golden Era.
You must be terribly surprised at receiving such a prompt reply from me this time. The truth is, here in these angelic surroundings, as I gradually allow all the sights, sounds and smells to seep into me, I begin to realize that there are precisely two motivations for putting down pen to paper. One, a near overpowering sense of loneliness, and two, an inexplicable excitement that urges one to immediately communicate all that one discovers about this brave, bewitching world. A Hindu legend, perhaps apocryphal, has it that when Lord Rama wanted to bridge the sea with a view to recovering Sita, he first considered the possibility of using the Andaman and Nicobar range of islands for this purpose. Subsequently, he did abandon this enterprise, but the fact remains that this is perhaps the first reference in history or legend to the two groups of islands now known as the Andamans and the Nicobars. The first thing that strikes one about the Andamans, apart from the near ethereal calm, is the intoxicating quality of the azure sea, an exquisite mirror to the mercurial sky. It does have a protean quality, now placid and ripple-free, now turbulent and stormy. Amidst the Bay of Bengal, the Union Territory of the Andaman and Nicobar group comprises approximately 572 islands and rocks, among which about 300 are significantly recognizable. The land area of the Andaman group is 6,340 square kilometers. Personally, I have never been statistically minded, but right now I'm enveloped by all kinds of literature on the Andamans. So I thought I'd do my good deed for the day and communicate some of the information to you. The terrain of the Andaman group of islands appears to be generally somewhat mountainous, with ranges of hills enclosing narrow valleys. The configuration of the land masses tends to suggest that these islands actually happen to be the ridges and visible summits of sunken ranges of mountains, with Saddle Peak at a height of 732 meters being the highest point. Since almost everything has to be supplied to these islands from the mainland, the region has an effective shipping network. Port Blair, the capital, is linked to the cities of Calcutta and Madras by regular Indian Airlines flights. But this linkage goes beyond a mere physical bond. In the evenings when I have oodles of time at my disposal, my only companions are my books, and a majority of them deal with a fascinating history of this place. After the somewhat half-hearted forays by people like Claudius Ptolemaeus, Aitzin, and Marco Polo, all of whom seem to firmly believe that the islanders were primarily cannibalistic, the first time that the world began to learn with some degree of accuracy about the Andamans and its people was in 1788, when Lord Cornwallis, the then Governor-General of India, commissioned the great surveyor Lieutenant Blair of the Navy to conduct a survey. During the course of his explorations and private research, the lieutenant discovered that according to one theory, the name Andaman owed its origin to the Malays, who called the region the islands of Andaman, because that is exactly how they pronounced Hanuman. Sir Henry Yule, who's famous for his erudite commentary on Marco Polo, has suggested that Angamanian, that is the name Marco Polo himself used, is an example of Arabic dual terminology indicating the two Andamans, the great one and the little one. Some, however, trace the origin of the word Angman to Ptolemaios, who described the region as the islands of good fortune, and hence the forms Andaman, Agdaman, and finally Andaman. Thus began the British debut, which was, however, short-lived, because despite the contribution of Captain Alexander Kidd of the Bengal Engineers and the arrival of 200 convicts, as many as 21 settlers died within 2 months. The cause of their deaths was a chronic complaint of jungle sores, precipitated, as it were, by scurvy. Death solidified on the island of Ross. Ross Island, thick with memories of Dr. James Patterson Walker setting up his headquarters, of it remaining the seat of local administration, including that of the Japanese, until after the Second World War, of it being abandoned, the Andaman home where 28 Andamanese were persuaded to live, Subhash Chandra Bose staying at the Chief Commissioner's residence, Ross Island, the Japanese swooping down, death solidified in the island of Ross. And today, is there a barrack, a post office, a club, a church? A church. One allows one's imagination to fly. A bishop, Mr. Craven, mass, service, a church. Lady Diana Duff Cooper, the famous beauty and socialite, wife of the then British Commissioner General of Southeast Asia, and one of the last of the important persons to spend a night on Ross Island before the Japanese invasion, writes in her diary, dated February 11th, 1942.
The house is indescribable, very large and wandery and shapeless, with devil carvings mixed with suburban taste. A huge haunted bedroom.
Haunted? And for me now, today, I'm reminded of nothingness and damp shadows. She has never been here, and yet it is this island that reminds me of her. The cobwebs seek her, for they are aware of her, of nothingness.
Viper Island. Now in ruins. A solitary building. The gallows. Ross Island. Viper Island, Ross Island.
Today's Port Blair is not what it was, with the Cellular jail sharing a peculiar empathy with the island of Ross, which it overlooks. The Cellular jail, a mute witness to the sufferings and sacrifices of those scores of freedom fighters who were immured in it as convicts. In the Port Blair township, this massive brick and concrete structure seems like an anomaly among the myriad timber houses. It symbolizes, as it were, imperialistic colonialism and the price the patriots had to pay for conspiring against the British. The self-same jail was used by the Japanese occupation army to imprison a large number of Indians who too supposedly conspired against them. Although one of the first acts of the Japanese upon landing was to set the prisoners of the jail free and thus pose as the savior of the Indian people. This gave rise to the ironic phrase, the Indian Bastille. The British authorities were not content with merely ordering banishment. They were intent on preventing contamination of ideas and hence decided to introduce the cellular jail system. Specific instructions were issued to the overseer to ensure that the prisoners did not communicate with one another. Each cell is constructed in such a way that the front of one block of cells faces the back of another block of cells. By 1897, 400 cells, constructed by the prisoners themselves, were ready for occupation. And by 1910, all the 7 wings of the cellular jail were completed.
The modern history of Andamans commences with the arrival of 772 freedom fighters of 1857 in Andamans on 10th March 1858.
So said Govind Rao Harshe, who had a very distinguished tenure here as a jail warden.
Non-compliance with the stringent jail regulations attracted severe punishment in the form of solitary confinement, flogging, and even merciless torture. All kinds of fetters were put on the apparel of prisoners to cause extreme mental torture. Such an existence caused so much of frustration that there were numerous instances of insanity, suicide, and death. Port Blair is the only town here in the true sense of the word. It is spread over an area of 14.4 square kilometers. Lieutenant Blair's initial reconnaissance his contribution to the British debut, the subsequent withdrawal notice on the 8th of February 1796, were followed by some sporadic forays, an incredible shipwreck, and then more shipwrecks. Eventually, the British flag was once again duly hoisted with appropriate solemnity on the 22nd of January, 1858. On that historic day began a new chapter in the history of the Andaman Islands. A chapter that included the birth of the penal settlement, the taming of the Andamanese, the coming of the political prisoners, and the gradual communication with the Onges and the Jarawas. It was a chapter that lasted until the Japanese reign of terror unleashed itself on the unsuspecting inhabitants. From the 23rd of March 1842, when the ships belonging to the Imperial Japanese Navy hit the islands of Ross and Chatham, right up to the 14th of August 1945, when the events of Hiroshima and Nagasaki forced the mighty Japanese to surrender, the Japanese had ruled with an iron hand.
July and August are fixed as labor months. Labor is sacred. Work hard. Whoever does not work has no right to exist. For the sake of India, for the sake of Burma, Indians and Burmans are all Japan's friends. Work, work, work hard. If no work, then no food. Idlers are no better than beasts. So work and be helpful.
During prolonged torture at the hands of the Japanese, many patriots perished inside the Cellular jail, as they refused to admit to the incredulous Nipponese army that they were not British spies. Among those who succumbed was Dr. Devan Singh, the president of the Indian Independence League. Finally, 44 persons, among whom were the executives and other members of the League, were taken to Humphrey Gunge village on the outskirts of Port Blair and shot. They were buried in an L-shaped mass grave on the festive day of Basant Panchami. It was the 30th of January, 1944. 4 years later, on this very day, the Mahatma would be brutally assassinated on the mainland. But the people still remember this day as a metaphor for a supreme sacrifice effected by the mingling of the blood of Hindus, Muslims, Buddhists, Christians, and Sikhs.
Ajuni Saibhang Gur Prasad Jap Ad Sach Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Sama Samuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Sama Samuddhassa Buddhang Divitang Parintang Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in Yahdina as-siratal mustaqim Siratal ladzina an'amta 'alaihim ghairil maghdubi 'alaihim
The inimitable patriot Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose was battling the British in his own way. Yet
the British returned to rule and continued until the 15th of August 1947, when the British sun finally set all over free India. A television crew had come down here and I showed them round. Sipighat. Situated about 14 kilometers from Port Blair, the Sipighat farm is spread over an area of 80 acres. It is not only a soil conservation demonstration farm, but also an attractive garden, which has become of late a tourist spot. coconut plantation, a life unto itself, an endeavor towards the experimental nurturing of saplings. Although the forests in these islands support more than 200 tree species, only 44 are of commercial value. Apart from the Forest Department, the Forest and Plantation Development Corporation is also engaged in the harvesting of valuable timber, the marketing of forest products, and the reforesting of the area. There are only 5 large-scale industries in this territory. In Chatham Island, the Andamanese can rightly boast of having one of the oldest sawmills in the country, perhaps in Asia. Epistolary correspondence has never really been my forte. There's so much to write about that I just can't leave my table. Newspapers are essential in a place like this, and perhaps the fear of irregular communication with the mainland gave rise to the daily telegrams, started more than 6 decades ago. During the Japanese occupation, the newspaper was renamed the Andaman Shimbun and served as a propaganda vehicle of the Japanese. While accompanying the television crew, we were in turn accompanied by the bush police. I found Project Yatrik in full swing. The Andaman Trunk Road, a result of this project, is a road that passes through the Jarawa tribal area. The road is in the process of construction. Dense jungles gradually seem to be giving way to modern construction. This is the main arterial route connecting the north and the south of the Andamans, and it goes through the home of the Jarawas. The Jarawas, after more than 2 centuries of hostility, have shown some signs of friendliness in the recent past, the credit for which must go to the contact party that constantly endeavored to befriend them. Prominent among the members of that party was Bakhtawar Singh, a former deputy superintendent of the Bush Police.
On that day, we went by boat to Chota Lake Bank in the middle western coast, where there exists a Java camp. As soon as we anchored and tried to land ashore, 11 Javas came.
Were they hostile?
They were very friendly. They had left their arrows. They came without any arrow and joined us.
Anthropological Survey of India estimates the number of Jarawas at anything between 250 and 300. In 1972, an expedition was undertaken by the Bush Police to befriend the Sentinelese. With an effort at depicting the exact relationship between the Sentinelese and the others who would befriend them, a films division crew accompanied the expedition.
At last, the first glimpse of the Sentinelese. Is this a first step towards understanding a tribe never before seen by outside eyes. This tribe believes in total isolation. It will not tolerate a stranger. We were prevented from approaching the shore.
Going by ship to the little Andamans, we met the Onges. They belong to the Negrito racial stock, and their average height is about 4 feet 10 inches. The only means of transport the Onges have is the dugout canoe. This is used not only for traveling, but also for turtle hunting. The Onges normally rest on cane platforms, with either a bamboo or a twig for a headrest. Often they delight in eating honeycombs and are not averse to the idea of swallowing some bees too. Another delight is pipe smoking, using a crab's claw. The sea is the single largest benefactor of the Andamanese. Shellcrafts, from driftwood to a variety of exquisite woodcrafts. It's time to stop. I don't feel that lonely anymore, and my mind is elsewhere. On the ship to Jolly Boy Island, amidst the corals, lonely, silent corals, symbolic of a world quietly beautiful, and yes, with a faint smile on its countenance.